Dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, good morning, good morning, good morning, bonjour. How are you doing today? It's Friday, it's Ken at 10. I hope you're well. We're on time today, that makes a change, doesn't it? If you haven't been here before, welcome, thanks for coming. And if you're wondering what it's all about, we are estate agents based in southwest London, to be specific. We're an area between Streatham and Croydon known as Norbury, SW16. We're a zone 3 commuting area. We talk about all things property, selling, buying, and everything in between, as well as anything that springs to mind, really. So how are you? I hope you're well. The weather here in SW16 is bright and sunny, a little bit chilly, but the spring does apparently seem to be coming. And of course, we've got shops opening on Monday. How exciting is that? Hairdressers for the ladies, not so much for me, I know, right? But also all the general shops are opening back up again, which is great to see. In terms of the market, still busy, still people trying to hit that deadline and hoping that they can be on board for the June deadline in order to avoid stamp duty. And we're finding a lot of that now. And of course, it's very tight now. So you need to get in quickly if you want to make that deadline. Will you make it? Realistically, for a lot of people, they won't, particularly leasehold property. It's going to be a problem. I want to talk a little bit about lettings today, because we haven't touched on lettings for a while. And as many of you will know, lettings is a big part of what we do. We have a large portfolio, a lot of landlords which we manage properties for, which we love to do. You know, it's always a hot topic. And right now, we've got the mayoral elections with Sadiq Khan talking about rent controls. And what would rent controls mean for the sector? And, you know, I've got this article out of Estate Agents today, and I think it's worth relaying. I think it's probably Graham Norwood wrote it. He usually writes everything there, and a very good journalist he is too. Hi, Graham, if you're watching. The main landlords trade body has hit out at a bid by London Mayor Sadiq Khan to secure powers to impose private sector rent controls. At the moment, the mayor's post does not have control over rents levied by private landlords, and Khan wants to change that. We've heard this for some time, haven't we? An analysis by the National Residential Landlords Association shows that private rents have fallen every year in real terms throughout Khan's period of office, and are now nearly 10% lower than 5 years ago compared to the retail price index. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because what that means is, had he imposed rent controls, rents would be higher now, not lower than they are. And the statistics are from the Office of National Statistics. They show that rents in the capital have fallen 9.6% between April 16, that's the month before Khan first came to office, and February 2021. Even compared to the CPI Consumer Price Index, including housing costs, which the government has said it plans to start using, rents fell by 5.1% over the same period. The NRLA is warning that NRLA, I should say, is warning that any move to rent control rises linking them to inflation would leave tenants worse off. In his manifesto for re-election, Mayor Sadiq Khan calls for the power to introduce rent controls in London. This is despite a report published by the Treasury in 2010 under last Labour government, in which Khan was a minister, that warned of the devastating impact of such a policy on inner city housing. Assessing the impact of rent controls before they were abolished in 1988, the report concluded that they'd been a major factor in the decay of the inner city housing stock. Interesting, isn't it? That actually, careful what you wish for, Mr. Khan, because you may actually end up exacerbating the problem. Because what happens is this, that you start imposing more rules on private sector landlords, and there are already many, many rules. I mean, to give you an insight in some of the struggles of landlords right now, the new figures of the number of landlords waiting possession cases in Crown Courts alone hit 57,000 in February, 57,000. And that's just in February, according to figures just out. So, you know, it just goes to show that, you know, if you impose rent controls, you just exacerbate the problem. And with all the struggles for landlords already in terms of the extra taxes and extra responsibilities, we're now talking about having to raise our energy performance standards to a level C in the future. All of these things put pressure on the private sector landlord and encourage them to exit the sector. The problem is, when you have an exodus from a sector, you then lose supply. And if you lose supply, what happens to prices? This is a supply and demand market. So it has the opposite effect. So I would say careful what you wish for, Mr. Khan. You could have exactly the opposite effect that you're trying to have. We know you're trying to help, but this is not the way forward. The way forward is to encourage private sector investment, because that's the only way we're going to get the additional supply that London needs. And right now, we're undersupplied. Hasn't shown through yet. Why? because of the lockdown. Well, as we release, you're going to start to find demand jumps again, and we can't supply the level of private sector housing that is required by people coming into the area. And the only way to get more is to actually get people to consider buy-to-let investment, because the public sector can't provide it. The private sector has been doing it on a national scale with large companies via various schemes, but it's still too little too late. So that's where we are on rent controls. So aside from that, the market, Friday is one of my favorite days of the week. If you watch regularly, you'll know that I love a Friday. Why do I love a Friday? Well, Saturday's the peak day for agents in showing properties. This is a day when people go out and look at properties with their families, decide what things they want to buy, how the properties they're looking at compare with others. And we do what we call a massive ring round and send out, where we're getting in touch with everybody that could possibly be interested in viewing over the course of the weekend, making sure that if they're out viewing, they're viewing with us, having discussions with them about their needs, wants, desires, how realistic those are, whether we can help them by guiding them to another area which might be cheaper or better for them, or more expensive in some cases. Sometimes you just need to spend a little bit more money to get what you want. And we have those discussions, sometimes difficult, sometimes easy. But the important thing is to, be honest with clients. And if there is an issue, own it. It's the only way you're going to move forward, is to explain to people what the options are. If you can't find what you want, where you want, the two choices you have: more money, other areas, or, the third one is, of course, lower your sites. So, always consider that think about it, try and step aside from it. The problem with housing is it's so emotive. We all get that emotion, don't we? We see ourselves having that barbecue in that garden, and then we realize the property's maybe going to be a little bit too much for us financially, and that's always a difficult thing. So in terms of the market generally, good weekend ahead, and with the easing of the lockdown, we're expecting to be busy for the next few weeks in a similar vein. Lots of valuations coming in, which is encouraging because we need the stock. There's certainly a drying up of stock coming on board, and that's a bit of a problem. But in terms of rentals are starting to get busier. They're not busy yet, but they're starting to get busier in and around the London suburbs, which is a good sign as well. So looking forward to the seeing people out in pub gardens. That really is something that I'm looking forward to next week. Just feeling that people are a bit more relaxed, able to come out, able to see their loved ones, have those barbecues in the garden. Hopefully the weather will be good for us. So that's it from Ken at 10 today. We've just produced a podcast with the fantastic Scott Chapman from Select Serve Surveyors, and that will be coming out later today. It'll be available, released on our social media channels on Facebook, and I hope you enjoy that. We're talking about surveys, valuations, cracking, what type of survey you should have, how surveying works, because it's a bit of a dark art, isn't it? We hope you find that useful. So Scott Chapman and myself, just look for, on your favorite podcast provider, just look for Ken Hume's podcast, and you'll find that later on today. We haven't yet uploaded it, a little bit of editing to do, but it's a really interesting one this week, I think. I think Scott came across really well and really did shine a light on a subject that a lot of people find confusing. So I hope you find that helpful on the Property Buyers and Sellers podcast. And I hope you're looking forward to the weekend and have a great one. Look after yourselves and your families and have a fantastic day. Quote of the week for the last time this week is from the late, great Steve Jobs. If you live each day as if it were your last, someday you'll most certainly be right. And he went on to say that every morning he looks in the mirror and says, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm doing today? And if you can say that, then you're doing well. And if you can't, perhaps make a change. Stay safe and well. Have a great weekend. We'll be back Monday morning with another edition. Take care.